Can you tell him to keep shut when I'm talking? He needs to learn his place.
The room went so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Marcus Reed stood up slow, buttoned his jacket, and looked the most powerful man in the room dead in the eye. "I'm canceling the deal," he said. "All $700 million of it." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And by the time the CEO understood what had just happened, Marcus was already walking out the door. But before we get to that moment, let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to see everything that led up to it. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching this from. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe. We are so close to reaching our first 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you gets us closer. Now, let's get into the story. It was a Tuesday morning, and Marcus Reed walked into the tallest building he had ever stepped foot in. His shoes were shined. His folder was tucked tight under his arm. His heart was pounding, but his face stayed calm, the way it always did. Marcus was 50 years old. He ran a small farming co-op that his father had started with nothing but 40 acres and a stubborn will to never give up. Over 30 years, that little patch of land had grown into something huge. 200 farming families now depended on it. 200 families who needed this deal to work. Today, Marcus was set to sign a $700 million contract with Ferris Global Foods, one of the biggest food companies in the whole country. 18 months of work, phone calls, meetings, long nights at the kitchen table with his son Devin crunching numbers, had led to this single moment. Beside him walked Marlon Chase, a young man who worked with Marcus, practically vibrating with nerves. "You ready?" Marlon whispered. "Been ready for 18 months, Marcus said, and he meant every word of it. The doors to the boardroom swung open, and there, at the head of a long, shiny table, stood Preston Kane. Kane was tall. His hair was silver. He had the kind of smile that filled up a whole room before he even said a word. He stuck out his hand, but not to Marcus, to Marlon. "Good to finally meet you in person," Kane said, shaking Marlon's hand hard. "I've heard great things." Marcus held out his own hand. He waited. 1 second. 2 seconds. Kane glanced at him, gave one tiny nod, and turned away like Marcus was nothing more than a coat rack that had wandered into the room by mistake. Maybe he's just busy, Marcus told himself, taking his seat. Big day for everyone. But the meeting started, and things did not get better. Kane talked numbers, talked delivery schedules, talked timelines, but every single word was aimed at Marlon. Every question, every little joke. Marlon. Marcus sat 2 feet away. He was the actual owner. His name was on every piece of paper in that folder. He had built this whole thing from dirt and sweat and long nights. And Kane looked straight through him, like he was made of glass. A young assistant walked around pouring coffee. She served the men on the board. She served Marlon. Then she skipped right past Marcus and moved to the next person. Marcus raised his hand a little. "Could I get a cup as well?" "Oh, sorry," she said, hurrying off. It was a small thing. Marcus let it go. He had sat in rooms like this before. He knew how to keep his face steady, even while something hot and ugly crawled up the back of his neck. Marlon shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. He tried, twice, to steer the conversation back. Actually, Marcus is the one who handles the co-op's distribution strategy. He'd know more about. Right, Kane said, already moving on, eyes still glued to Marlon. "So, as I was saying, your delivery windows." By the time they reached the actual contract, something tight and burning had settled deep in Marcus's chest. He cleared his throat. "I want to talk about the delivery clause on page 12, he said, his voice steady. "It says 40,000 units a month, but we agreed on 35 back in March. I need that fixed before." "Yeah, that's just standard wording," Kane cut in, not even glancing at the page. He turned to Marlon. "We'll go over the freight numbers after lunch." "I'm sorry," Marcus said, sharper now. "I was speaking." Kane blinked at him, like he'd just noticed a fly buzzing near his ear. "Sorry, what was that, Mr. Reeves?" "Reed," Marcus said. "Marcus Reed." "Right, Reed." Kane said it like the name itself was some kind of annoying chore. He gave a short laugh and turned back to his papers. "Anyway, Marlon, freight costs." The room moved on without him. Pen scratched across paper. Someone laughed quietly at something Kane said under his breath. Marcus sat there, hands flat on the table, staring at his empty coffee cup that nobody had ever come back to fill. 18 months of work sitting 2 feet away, on a page nobody was even reading to him. Something inside Marcus, something old and tired and finally done, snapped quiet into place. He picked up his pen and set it down slowly on the table. The small click of metal against polish would cut through Kane's voice like a gunshot. "One more thing," Marcus said. Kane didn't even look up. "Hold that thought. We're almost." I said, "One more thing." His voice came out harder this time, and the whole room went still. Even the board members stopped writing. Kane finally turned to him, eyebrows raised, like Marcus had interrupted something sacred. "Go ahead, Mr. Reeves." "Read," Marcus said, slow and clear, like he was teaching a child to read. "My name is Marcus Reed. I built this cooperative from 40 acres my father left me. 200 families put food on tables in 6 states because of what we built. I flew here on my own money to sign this deal. And in the last hour, you have looked at me exactly twice." The room was dead silent. Kane let out a short laugh, the kind rich men use when they want to shrink a problem down to nothing. "Nobody's ignoring you, Marcus. We're just moving fast. Big company, lots to cover." "You got my name wrong twice," Marcus said. "You let your assistant serve coffee to everyone at this table except me. You cut me off mid-sentence to talk freight with a man who's worked for me 8 months. His voice stayed level, but every word landed like a brick. "I don't need you fast. I need you to see me sitting in this chair." Kane's jaw tightened. "I think you're reading a lot into a busy meeting. We're trying to close $700 million here. I don't have time to hold your hand through it." Nobody at that table said a word in his defense. Not one person. Marcus looked around at all the silent faces, all the careful eyes avoiding his, like he was something embarrassing to be near. 18 months, 200 families, and in this room, he didn't exist. He stood up. The chair scraped back loud against the floor. He reached down, picked up the unsigned contract, and laid it flat in the center of the table. "Marcus, come on," Marlon said quietly, half rising out of his seat. "Sit down, Marlon. This isn't on you." Marcus buttoned his jacket and looked Kane dead in the eye. "I don't do business with men who can't see me." Then he turned and walked toward the door, and everything, for everyone in that building, was about to change. "Marcus!" Kane's voice chased him across the room, sharp with disbelief, like nobody had ever walked out on him before. "You're really going to throw away $700 million over a few coffee cups?" Marcus didn't stop, didn't turn around. He pushed through the glass doors, and the only sound he could hear was his own footsteps over the blood pounding in his ears. Behind him, faint through the closing door, he heard Kane laugh. An easy, careless laugh. "Cold feet," Kane said to his board, loud enough that Marcus was sure he meant for him to hear it. "He'll be back by Friday. They always come back." Marcus's hands were shaking by the time he reached the elevator. Not from fear, from something deeper, something that had been building for years. Every meeting where he'd been talked over. Every deal where his word was worth less than someone else's handshake. Every room where he had to prove twice as hard that he belonged in the chair he was sitting in. He pulled out his phone and called Grace Whitfield, the lawyer who had helped him build the co-op from nothing over 20 years. "Marcus, how'd the signing go?" His voice cracked, just slightly. "Grace, I need you to clear your evening. Something happened." Grace listened to the whole story without interrupting once. The missing handshake, the mispronounced name, the empty coffee cup, the way Kane had talked through him like he was a wall someone accidentally built in the middle of the boardroom. When Marcus finished, she sat back and let out a long breath. "I believe you. Every word. I'm not blowing this out of proportion. You've sat across from men who didn't respect you before," Grace said steadily. "I've watched you smile through it for years because a deal mattered more than your pride. The fact that this finally broke you tells me it was bad." She turned to her laptop, fingers flying. "I've heard whispers about Ferris before. Nothing solid. Let me look." A few minutes later, she spun the screen around. On it were three names, three small minority-owned supplier companies that had worked with Ferris Global Foods over the past 2 years. All three had quietly ended their contracts. All three cited the exact same reason: communication issues. That's what they called it, Gray said, when they stopped paying a dairy farmer on time for 3 months straight, until he had no choice but to walk. Same story with a produce distributor a few states over. 6 weeks of silence before they cut him loose. Marcus stared at the screen, his stomach turning slow and sick. This isn't one bad meeting. No, Gray said, this is a pattern, and you might be the only one with the profile and the leverage to actually do something about it. 3 days later, Marcus's phone rang before sunrise. It was Grace, and she skipped hello entirely. Ferris told her shareholders, in writing 2 months ago, that your deal was as good as done. $700 million, locked in, starting next quarter. Their next shareholder report comes out in 9 days. If that contract isn't signed by then, they have to explain to every investor why a deal they brag about just vanished into thin air. Before Marcus could respond, his other line buzzed. An unfamiliar number, area code from Ferris headquarters. Mr. Reed, a smooth voice said, "My name is Harold Ness. I'm chairman of the board at Ferris Global Foods. I think it's time we talked." Marcus put him on speaker. "I'm prepared to offer you $2 million, Ness said. "Pay directly to you, personally, in exchange for a standard non-disclosure agreement. You walk away with your dignity intact, financially secure, and this whole unfortunate incident stays private." The kitchen went dead silent. Marcus's son, Devin, mouthed the word bribe and scrawled it on a legal pad. "What about the other suppliers?" Marcus asked suddenly. Silence. A beat too long. "I'm not sure I follow," Ness said, his voice suddenly careful. "Were they offered $2 million too, Mr. Ness? Or just me? Because I'm the one about to make noise before your shareholder report drops." The line went dead a moment later, and Marcus set the phone down slow, his hand not quite steady. "This was never about the money," he told Devin and Grace. "We're not signing anything. We're exposing all of it." The silence after that call didn't last. 3 days later, Marcus's cooperative manager called, her voice shaking. Their biggest regional distributor had just canceled a 6-year contract, effective immediately, citing restructuring. By afternoon, 2 more distributors had done the exact same thing. "This is retaliation," Gray said flatly, sitting at the Reed kitchen table. "Ferris doesn't control your distributors directly, but they do business with all 3 of these companies. One quiet word about reconsidering future partnerships, and these companies fold to protect the bigger relationship. It's not illegal. It's just cruel." Devin ran the numbers late into the night. 6 weeks of runway before the co-op started missing payroll. 6 weeks before 200 families felt the weight of what had happened in that boardroom. "They think they can starve me out," Marcus said quietly. "Make me crawl back and sign the NDA before the shareholder report drops." "Which means they're scared," Grace said. "Scared enough to play dirty this fast." Devin knew a journalist, sharp, fair, and unafraid of fight. Her name was Dana Okafor, and 2 days later she sat across from Devin in a small coffee shop, listening to the whole story without interrupting once. The boardroom, the bribe, the retaliation, the pattern of suppliers cut loose the exact same way. "That's a hell of a story," Dana said finally. "But I need to verify everything myself. Give me 5 days. 5 days later, the story went live at dawn, and Marcus's phone exploded with 40 missed calls before he even got out of the field. Silence at the table. How Ferris Global Foods built a $700 million empire by erasing the suppliers who built it with them. By that afternoon, Ferris's stock had dropped 4%. A national morning show wanted Marcus for an interview. Kane's own board issued a stiff statement about unintentional oversight. For one golden evening, sitting around the kitchen table with Devin and Grace, it felt like maybe, just maybe, the fight was already won. Marcus should have known better. He woke the next morning to 43 missed calls, and a video already sitting at 2 million views. 14 seconds, ripped clean out of 90 minutes. No mispronounced name. No missing coffee cup. Just a black man shooting up out of his chair, voice raised, storming toward the door, captioned, and shared and twisted into something Marcus barely recognized as himself. 2 more distributors pulled out that morning. The bank froze the co-op's emergency credit line by noon. And that night, a manila envelope arrived on Marcus's kitchen table, a new settlement offer, and 24 hours to decide whether to sign away the truth for good. Marcus sat alone at the kitchen table long after Grace and Devon had gone quiet, the settlement papers spread out under the dim light. A lump payment, enough to save the co-op twice over. In exchange, silence forever. The edited video would stand as the truth. Marcus Reed, the man who stormed out, unstable, unprofessional. That story would live on uncorrected, while the real one stayed buried under number with a lot of zeros. You're actually considering it, Devon said, finding him there past midnight. I've got 200 families counting on payroll in 3 weeks, Marcus said, rubbing his eyes. I'm 50 years old. I can't let my pride bury all of that. This isn't about pride, Dad. If you sign this, that video becomes a truth forever. Everyone who came forward because you were brave enough to walk out first, they get left holding nothing. Marcus knew she was right. He also knew payroll didn't care about being right. 1 more day, he said finally. Give me 1 more day before I decide anything. Then, at 1 in the morning, a knock sounded at the front door. Marcus opened it to find Marlon Chase standing on the porch, hair a mess, jacket wrinkled like he'd been wearing it for 2 days straight. I'm sorry to come this late, Marlon said, voice shaking. There's something I need to show you. Something I should have shown you weeks ago. He held up his phone. His hand was trembling. I should have told you this the day it happened, Marlon said. Ferris has this unofficial practice. Everyone in client-facing roles records major meetings, just in case there's ever dispute about what was said. He swallowed hard. I recorded the whole meeting. The real one. All 90 minutes. The room went dead silent. Grace's voice cut through it, tight with urgency. Play it. The footage was unmistakable. Kane's warm voice, aimed entirely at Marlon from the very first handshake. The coffee served at everyone but Marcus. The name gotten wrong, not once but twice. Marcus's question about the contract, cut off mid-sentence. And that careless laugh as Marcus walked out. Cold feet. He'll be back by Friday. 90 full minutes of context the 14-second clip had stolen from him. This destroys the edited video. Grace breathed. Completely. Why now? Marcus asked Marlon quietly. I was scared. Student loans, a mortgage, a job I couldn't easily replace. His eyes were wet. But watching people call you unhinged this morning, knowing exactly what really happened in that room, I couldn't live with myself anymore. I'd rather lose my job than let that lie stand. Marcus gripped the young man's shoulder, firm. That took more courage than most grown men have ever shown me. By 7 the next morning, Dana Okafor sat in Grace's office verifying every second of footage, timestamps, metadata, the unbroken audio waveform. It's clean, she said. This is the real thing. She sent Ferris one final email before publishing, giving them until 5 that evening to respond. What none of them knew was a storm that email set off inside Ferris headquarters. Harold Ness sat with it for 20 minutes before calling an emergency meeting with legal counsel. He pulled Kane's internal emails himself that afternoon and found exactly what he feared. A message, 3 days old, from Kane to the company's PR firm. Pull the clip where he stands up. Cut everything before it. Get it out anonymously by tonight. We need the narrative to flip before the shareholder report. Ness sat alone in his office as the light slanted low through his windows, thinking about 30 years spent building something he'd been proud of, and the 14-second Liaison CEO had ordered to bury an innocent man. He made his decision before the sun went down. That evening, Dana's inbox received 2 things almost at once. A cold, formal no comment from Ferris's communications office. And, from a different address entirely, the forwarded email chain, Kane's own words, in writing. Ness had leaked it himself, with a short note attached. I have called an emergency shareholder meeting for tomorrow morning. Please publish whatever you believe serves the truth. Dana's follow-up story detonated by nightfall. The next morning, the emergency shareholder meeting was streamed to a packed virtual room. Marcus sat in the front row beside Grace, Devon, and Marlon, an invitation that had arrived at 6 a.m. with a single line. You deserve to see this happen. Harold Ness stood at the podium, his face drawn but steady. 31 years ago, I helped build this company, he said. I have never been more ashamed of it than I am standing here today. He laid out everything: the boardroom, the pattern of arrayed suppliers, the bribe, the retaliation, and a deliberately edited video ordered by the company's own chief executive. Effective immediately, Preston Kane is removed as CEO of Ferris Global Foods. Kane shot to his feet, red-faced, sputtering about lawyers and 30 years of growth. Security walked him out within 90 seconds, his voice cracking under the weight of every camera in the room. Then, from the back of the room, a new voice rang out. A tall man in a charcoal suit, Bramwell Sons, CEO of one of Ferris's biggest rivals, walked straight down the aisle toward Marcus, hand outstretched. "What happened to you was wrong," he said, loud enough for every camera to catch. "What you did about it took more courage than most men in this industry have ever shown. My company would be honored to offer Reed Family Growers Co-op an $800 million multi-year supply contract. Right here, right now." The room went electric. Marcus looked at his son, eyes shining. He looked at Marlon, who'd risked everything to make this moment possible. He thought of his father, of 40 acres, of 200 families, and a boardroom where he'd once been treated like furniture. "I'll need a pen," Marcus said, his voice steady, carrying clear across the room. He signed his name in full view of every camera in the building. And this time, the whole world was watching him be seen. Marcus never forgot what it cost to get there, but he never regretted standing up either, because staying silent would have cost him more. If this story moved you even a little, that's exactly why we make them. We're a small channel trying to reach our very first 1,000 subscribers, and honestly, we can't get there without you. So if Marcus's story meant something to you today, hit that subscribe button right now. It genuinely helps us keep telling stories like this one. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and I'll see you in the next story.